just a lowly music teacher. That was how my sister-in-law introduced me to Manhattan's elite before dismissing me entirely. She thought I spent my days teaching children in a basement, unaware that for 2 years, I had been secretly treating America's greatest rock legend, who had vanished for a decade, tonight, while she toasts at her luxury gala. She will see me on national television, holding the power to destroy her glittering career. My name is Shirley Pennington. I am 34 years old, and to the outside world, specifically the high society circle my in-laws inhabit, I am invisible. My profession is listed on their mental Rolodex as something adjacent to a babysitter or a dog walker. I work as a music therapist at the Serenade Rehabilitation Institute. If you drove past Serenade on the outskirts of the city, you would likely keep driving. It is a brick building that has seen better days, with ivy that looks more like it is strangling the structure than decorating it, and paint that peeled sometime in the late 90s. To the Penningtons, it is a depressing warehouse for broken people. To me, it is the only place in the world where the truth actually matters. The irony of my life is never sharper than when I am seated at the dining table of the Pennington estate in Connecticut. The house is a sprawling monument to old money and new pretensions, a place where the air always feels 10 degrees colder than it does outside. We were midway through the second course, a tasteless but expensive poached salmon. When I decided to speak, I had rehearsed this moment for 3 days. I had practiced the tone of my voice, keeping it light and breezy, trying to sound like I belonged in this room of sharks. "I have something I wanted to give you all," I said. My voice did not shake, though my hands wanted to grip the napkin in my lap. I reached into my bag and pulled out 4 heavy cream-colored envelopes. I slid them across the polished mahogany surface. One for my mother-in-law, Eleanor, one for my father-in-law, Richard, and 2 for the golden couple across from me, my husband's brother, Brad, and his shark-eyed wife, Vanessa. Vanessa didn't even look up from her phone. She was typing furiously, likely putting out a fire for one of her high-profile fashion clients. Vanessa was the director of public relations for a major luxury conglomerate. She dealt in illusions, in making people want things they could not afford and did not need. "What is this, Shirley?" Brad asked, picking up the envelope with 2 fingers as if it might be contaminated. "Another fundraiser for the clinic? I thought we sent a check last Christmas." "It is not a fundraiser," I said, keeping my spine straight against the stiff dining chair. "It is an invitation. Next Friday is the annual tribute concert at the Lincoln Center. The board has selected me to receive the Dedication to Healing Award this year. It is a really big honor. I would love for you all to be there." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Eleanor stopped chewing her salmon. Richard took a long, slow sip of his wine, his eyes glazing over as if he were mentally calculating his stock portfolio. Then, Vanessa laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound, like glass breaking on a marble floor. She finally set her phone down and looked at the envelope Brad was holding. She did not reach for her own. "A dedication award?" Vanessa asked, a smirk playing on her lips that were painted a shade of red that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "That is adorable. Shirley, really, it is like those participation trophies they give to children who come in last place at field day. A little pat on the back for enduring a job in that depressing basement. It is a national recognition." "Vanessa," I said quietly, "for my work with traumatic brain injuries and severe PTSD, PTSD, she repeated, rolling her eyes. "So, we are talking about what? A room full of confused old men banging on bongos? And you want us to drive all the way into the city, sit in a drafty hall, and pretend to enjoy amateur hour?" Brad chuckled, taking his cue from his wife. "She has a point. Shirley. Next Friday? That is impossible. You know what next Friday is?" I did not know. In my world, next Friday was the culmination of 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears. In their world, apparently, it was something else entirely. "It is the luxury gala," Vanessa announced, as if she were declaring a national holiday. "The launch of the Obsidian Diamond Collection. It is the single biggest event on the social calendar this year. My company is organizing it. Everyone who is anyone will be there. She turned to Eleanor, her entire demeanor shifting from mockery to sycophancy. Eleanor, wait until you see the gown I pulled for you. It is a Vera Wang custom. Silk chiffon, hand-beaded. You will outshine every 20-year-old debutante in the room. Eleanor's face lit up in a way it never had for me. Oh, Vanessa, you are a darling. I was worried about what to wear. Is it the midnight blue one we discussed? The very same, Vanessa beamed. Then her eyes flicked back to me, the warmth vanishing instantly. So you see, Shirley, Vanessa said, her voice dropping to that patronizing register one uses for slow children or disobedient pets. We are busy, real work, real events, not whatever this is. I understand you are busy, I tried one last time, foolishly. But the ceremony starts at 7. The gala does not begin until 9. You could just stop by for 30 minutes. It would mean a lot to me. Vanessa sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation of breath. She picked up her wineglass and swirled the dark red liquid, staring at me through the crystal. Come on, Shirley, she said. You are just a lowly teacher. Do not make us waste our time sitting through some tragic display of veterans playing drums just so you can feel important for 5 minutes. We operate on different levels. Our class is different. The people at my gala control the economy. The people at your concert are well. They are charity cases. I looked at Brad, hoping for some defense. He was my husband's brother. We had shared holidays for 7 years. But Brad just shrugged, cutting into his steak. Vanessa is right. Shirley, it is a bad night. Maybe next time. My parents-in-law were already deep in conversation with Vanessa about the seating arrangements for the Diamond launch. We need to make sure we are not seated near the Hamiltons, Eleanor was saying. Their net worth has dropped significantly since the scandal. Do not worry, Vanessa assured her. I put you at the head table with the CEO, top tier only. I sat there for a moment, the rejection settling into my bones like a familiar chill. They saw a woman in a department store dress, a woman who took the subway, a woman who spent her days with people society wanted to forget. They saw a lowly teacher, slowly, calmly. I reached out. Brad had left the invitation lying on the tablecloth, unopened. I placed my hand over it. The paper was heavy, textured, what they did not know, because they had not bothered to open it or even look closely at the embossing, was that the invitation was not standard cardstock. It was plated in 24-karat gold leaf. It had been designed by a graphic artist who usually worked for royalty, commissioned specifically for this night. I slid the envelope back toward me. I gathered the other 3 untouched invitations from the table. I understand, I said softly. Good, Vanessa said, turning back to her phone. Pass the salt. Would you? I passed the salt. I placed the invitations back into my purse. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not tell them that the old man banging on bongos they mocked was a man whose autograph Vanessa had been trying to buy for 5 years. I did not tell them that the amateur hour was being produced by the same team that handled the Super Bowl halftime show. I just watched them eat their expensive fish, oblivious to the fact that they had just declined a seat at the only table that really mattered. They thought I was trapped in the dark with them. They had no idea I was the one holding the switch. The Serenade Rehabilitation Institute does not look like a place where miracles happen. It looks like a municipal building that the city council forgot to renovate in the 90s. The fluorescent lights in the hallway hum with a low, headache-inducing frequency, and the linoleum floors are scuffed by the rubber wheels of wheelchairs and gurneys. To my sister-in-law, this is a basement where failures go to hide. To me, it is a cathedral of the mind. I swiped my security badge at the heavy steel doors of the East Wing. This sector is restricted. It does not exist on the public floor plans of the hospital. Inside, the air is filtered and quiet, smelling faintly of lavender and antiseptic. My work here is not teaching nursery rhymes to toddlers. I am a neurologic music therapist. I work with brains that have been shattered by trauma. stroke, and catastrophe. I use rhythm and melody to rebuild the neural pathways that medicine has declared dead for the past 2 years. My life has revolved around Room 4B. The patient in Room 4B was admitted under a pseudonym to the few orderlies allowed inside. He was just Mr. Smith, a man with a traumatic brain injury and severe expressive aphasia. He had not spoken a coherent sentence in a decade. He sat in his chair by the window, staring at the brick wall opposite, a shell of a human being. But I knew who he was. The world knew him as Julian Thorne. 10 years ago, Julian Thorne was the god of blues rock. He could make a guitar weep and a stadium scream. Then, his private jet went down in a storm over the Rockies. The pilot died. Julian survived. But the man who was pulled from the wreckage was broken in ways that bones do not show. The trauma locked him inside his own head. He lost his music, his voice, and his will. The press speculated he was in rehab, or living on a private island, or disfigured, eventually. They just stopped asking. The silence was absolute. When I first met him, he was like a statue carved from grief. He would not make eye contact. He would not tap his foot. I started with a simple metronome, set to 60 beats per minute, the rhythm of a resting human heart. "It is just a heartbeat, Julian," I had whispered to him during those first agonizing months. "Just find the pulse." I spent hundreds of hours in that room. I played simple chords on an acoustic guitar, watching the monitors for any spike in his brain activity. I sang low, wordless melodies, trying to bypass the damaged frontal lobe and access the amygdala, where the emotional memory of music lives. It was exhausting. Microscopic work. It was like trying to reconstruct a smashed stained glass window using only dust. The breakthrough happened on a rainy Tuesday, 7 months into our therapy. I was playing a blues scale in E minor, a progression he had used in his most famous ballad. I saw his left hand twitch. It was not a spasm. It was a reach. His fingers curled, ghosting the shape of a fretboard on the armrest of his wheelchair. I stopped playing. The room was silent. "Do not stop," a voice rasped. It sounded like gravel grinding together, unused and rusted. But it was a voice. I looked up. Julian Thorne was looking at me, his eyes clear for the first time in a decade. "Do not stop," he repeated, the words gaining strength. That is the first time I have heard anything but the crash. Since that day, we had rebuilt him, note by note. We moved from humming to singing, from singing to speaking. The music was the bridge that let his mind cross back into reality. We developed a bond that was difficult to explain to anyone outside this room. It was not romantic. It was something deeper, forged in the fires of survival. He was the traveler who had been lost in the underworld, and I was the guide who held the torch. "You are the only one, Shirley," he told me last week during our final session before the ceremony. He was sitting at the grand piano in the therapy room, his fingers finding the keys with a dexterity that defied every medical prognosis. "You are the only one who heard the scream in my silence. Everyone else just saw the celebrity. You saw the man drowning." The irony of his words stung. While I was pulling Julian Thorne back from the abyss, Vanessa was desperately trying to claw her way to him. I had seen the piles of correspondence in the administrative office. Vanessa's PR firm had sent over 50 requests for an interview, a comment, or a cameo appearance in the last 5 years alone. They were all generic. Hollow pitches about brand synergy and legacy management. They offered him money he did not need, and fame he despised. Vanessa called him a reclusive diva at Thanksgiving dinner last year. She had complained that artists like him were selfish for denying the public their content. She had no idea that while she was ranting over turkey and stuffing, I had just come from holding Julian's hand while he wept, finally processing the grief of the crash that took his best friend. "They want the icon," Julian had said, tossing one of Vanessa's glossy media kits into the trash bin in the corner of his room. "They do not want the human." I never told him Vanessa was my sister-in-law. I kept my two worlds strictly separated. My professional ethics demanded it. but my personal survival required it. If Vanessa knew I had access to Julian Thorne, she would have drained me dry. She would have turned my healing sanctuary into a photo opportunity. "Are you sure about tonight, Julian?" I asked him, adjusting the collar of the shirt he had not worn in years. "The lights, the crowds, it will be overwhelming. You do not have to present the award. A video message would be enough." He turned to me, and the transformation was complete. The broken man in the wheelchair was gone. Standing before me was the legend, but with a new depth in his eyes that only suffering can carve. "I have been hiding in the dark for 10 years. Shirley," he said, his voice a rich baritone that resonated in the small room. "You gave me back my voice. I am not going to use it to record a video message. I am going to use it to tell the world who saved me." He looked at the clock on the wall. "Go. You have to get ready. The car will pick you up at 6. "I can take the subway," I said automatically. Old habits died hard. "You are not taking the subway tonight," he ordered gently. "Tonight, you are the star." But I did take the subway part of the way, just to feel the ground beneath my feet one last time. I sat on the hard plastic seat of the train, clutching my bag. Across from me, a teenager was scrolling through Instagram. I could see the reflection of the screen in the window. It was a live feed from Vanessa. She was in the back of a stretch limousine, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "On my way to make history. The luxury gala is the only place to be tonight. Boss babe high society." I looked down at my own dinner, a turkey sandwich from the hospital cafeteria wrapped in wax paper. I took a bite. The bread was stale. My feet ached from a 12-hour shift. My coat was 5 years old and missing a button. In Vanessa's world, I was a failure. I was the poor relation, the lowly teacher, the background noise. She was speeding toward her gala, convinced she was the center of the universe. Surrounded by diamonds and sycophants, she believed power came from how many cameras were pointed at you. I finished my sandwich and crumpled the wrapper. The train rattled into the station near my apartment. I had 2 hours to transform. I had a dress hanging in my closet that Julian had commissioned for me. A secret armor for the battle ahead. Vanessa was chasing ghosts and reflections. She was driving toward a mirage. I was walking toward the truth. She thought she knew what power was. But as I stepped off the train and walked up the stairs toward the street, I knew something she did not. I knew that the man she had worshipped and chased for a decade was not going to be at her party. He was going to be standing next to the lowly teacher she had laughed at, and he was going to sing. The train pulled away, the sound of the wheels on the tracks sounding like a drum roll. The show was about to begin. 2 days before the night that would incinerate my sister-in-law's reputation. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Vanessa. She did not text first to ask if I was free. She simply called, expecting an immediate answer, the way a queen expects a summons to be obeyed by a serf. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Shirley, thank God," Vanessa said, breathless and already irritated. "We have a crisis. Maria just called in sick with some flu or whatever. She claims she is contagious. I need you to come over Friday night and watch the dogs. Precious gets anxiety when there are thunderstorms, and the forecast says rain." I blinked, staring at the half-empty cup of tea in my hand. Friday night, the night of the Lincoln Center tribute, the night I had explicitly invited them to less than a week ago. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady, "I cannot watch the dogs on Friday. That is the night of my award ceremony, the one I invited you to." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was not a pause of realization. It was the silence of someone buffering because the input they received did not match their programming. "You are joking," she snapped. "Shirley, be serious. I have the Diamond Gala. This is the biggest night of my career. I cannot leave the dogs alone. And I certainly cannot find a vetted sitter on 48 hours' notice. Just skip your little thing. What are they going to give you? A plaque? I will pay you double your usual rate." She thought she paid me to exist. "I am not skipping it," I said. "And I am not a dog sitter. I am the guest of honor at a national event. You will have to find someone else. You are being incredibly selfish. Her voice rose an octave, sharp enough to cut glass. I offer you a chance to actually be helpful to this family, and you chose to indulge in this delusion of grandeur? Nobody cares about your award. Shirley, it is a participation trophy for people who could not make it as real doctors. Do not come crying to me when you are sitting in an empty room and realize you alienated the only people who tolerate you. She hung up before I could respond. The line went dead. An hour later, I saw exactly why she was so stressed. I was scrolling through my newsfeed during my lunch break at the clinic when a video popped up. It was a live stream from a press brunch Vanessa was hosting at her agency. She stood in front of a wall of white roses, wearing a cream suit that likely cost more than my car. She was holding a microphone, beaming at a crowd of fashion journalists and investors. "We promise a night of surprises at the Obsidian Gala," Vanessa purred into the camera. "We have secured the most exclusive guest list in Manhattan." A reporter shouted a question from the back. "Vanessa, there are rumors that you have been in talks with Julian Thorne's estate. Is there any truth that the recluse might make an appearance?" I froze. Vanessa did not flinch. She smiled, a coy, practiced expression that suggested she knew secrets the rest of the world was not ready for. "Let us just say," she said, winking, "that my agency has very deep connections. Julian and I have been in communication. He is a difficult artist, but he knows quality when he sees it. I cannot confirm anything officially, but I would not bet against us. We are very close." I nearly dropped my phone. The audacity was breathtaking. She had never spoken to Julian. She had sent emails to a spam folder. She was leveraging a man she thought was brain dead to sell tickets to a diamond launch. She was selling a ghost story. That evening, my brother-in-law, Brad, called. He did not sound angry, which was worse. He sounded disappointed, the way a parent sounds when a child draws on the walls. "Shirley," he sighed, "Vanessa is really upset. She's under a lot of pressure. Why do you have to be so difficult? You know how much this gala means to her." "Brad," I said, "it is my award night." We know," he said dismissively. "But let us be real. It is a work thing. You can pick up the certificate on Monday. Family comes first. Just go watch the dogs. It would smooth things over. Do not make this a thing. You really need to know your place in the hierarchy. Shirley, we carry the weight. You support. That is how it works." I looked around my small apartment. It was clean but worn. The radiator hissed in the corner. Then, I looked at the closet door. I walked over and opened it. Inside, pushed to the very back behind my gray wool coat and a few cardigans, hung a garment bag. I unzipped it just a few inches. The fabric inside shimmered even in the dim light. It was a gown of deep, midnight blue velvet and silk, structured and architectural, a masterpiece of haute couture. It had been delivered 3 days ago with a note from Julian. "Armor for the warrior queen. Wear this when you take your bow." "I am sorry, Brad," I said into the phone, staring at the blue silk. "I cannot help you. I have plans." I hung up on him. 2. Friday morning arrived with a gray sky, but my phone rang with news that brought the sun. It was the event producer from Lincoln Center. "Mrs. Pennington," she said, her voice buzzing with adrenaline. "We just got the confirmation. The network has bumped the rerun of the sitcom. The tribute concert is going live. Prime time, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. We are going head-to-head with the broadcast of the charity ball on the other channel." The charity ball, Vanessa's gala. "We expect viewership to be in the millions," the producer continued, "especially with the special segment we have planned. Make sure your speech is ready. The whole country will be watching." I sat on the edge of my bed. The stage was set. It was not just a ceremony anymore. It was a showdown. 2 events, 2 worlds, 1 lie, and 1 truth. I opened the family group chat on my phone. The last message was a photo from Vanessa of a diamond necklace she would be wearing. Captioned, "Perfection." I typed my message slowly. Best of luck to everyone tonight. I know you are busy, but if you get a moment, do not forget to turn on the TV, Channel 4. You might see something interesting. I hit send. A moment later, a notification popped up. Vanessa had reacted to the message. She reacted with a laughing face emoji. I put the phone down and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I did not look like a lowly teacher anymore. I looked like someone who was about to strike a match. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and desperation. This was Vanessa's kingdom. 500 of New York's wealthiest socialites were packed into a room that shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the cold brilliance of the obsidian diamond collection. Waiters moved like ghosts through the crowd, pouring vintage champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly rent. On the surface, it was a triumph, but I knew my sister-in-law well enough to know she was drowning. From what I later learned, Vanessa was currently cornered near the ice sculpture, forcing a bright, terrified smile at Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling was a venture capitalist whose portfolio could make or break entire industries. He was the whale Vanessa had spent 6 months trying to harpoon for her agency. It is a lovely arrangement, Vanessa. Mr. Sterling said, looking at his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He was a man who measured time in thousands of dollars. But I must admit, the energy is a bit flat. The night is just beginning. Arthur, Vanessa purred, placing a hand on his arm. Wait until the diamond reveal at 9 o'clock. We have a laser show that will blow your mind. Lasers, Sterling grunted, unimpressed. My grandson likes lasers. I prefer history. While Vanessa was sweating through her silk gown in Midtown, I was sitting in the back of a black Phantom Rolls-Royce, gliding silently toward the Lincoln Center. The city outside was a blur of rain and neon, but inside the car, it was dead silent. My hands were folded in my lap. I was not wearing the department store clearance dress Vanessa had sneered at in my mind. I was wearing the midnight blue velvet gown Julian had given me. It hugged my frame like a second skin, the high collar giving me the posture of a queen, the long train pooling at my feet. The car slowed. We were not at the public entrance. We were at the VIP artist's gate. "We are here, Ms. Pennington," the driver said. I looked out the tinted window. The security was tighter than a presidential inauguration. There were black SUVs everywhere, men with earpieces, and a perimeter of barricades holding back a sea of photographers. This was not a party. This was an event of national gravity. "Ready?" the driver asked. I took a deep breath. "Ready," back at the Pierre. The atmosphere was shifting. A murmur was rippling through the crowd, distracting them from the diamonds. Guests were checking their phones, whispering behind their hands. "Mr." Sterling pulled his phone out of his tuxedo pocket. His eyebrows shot up. "Vanessa," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient jazz music. "Is it true? Is that true?" Vanessa asked, her smile faltering. "The rumors about Lincoln Center. Twitter is exploding. They say Julian Thorne is in the building." Vanessa laughed. It was that same brittle, glass-breaking laugh she had used at the dinner table. "Oh, Arthur, please, do not believe the tabloids. Julian Thorne has not been seen in 10 years. The man is practically an invalid. It is just a desperate attempt by the Arts Council to sell tickets." "I don't know," Sterling said, showing her his screen. The vice president just arrived there, and Mick Jagger, and the CEO of Sony Music. They are not there for a desperate charity show. He looked around the room, bored. "Turn on the screens." Vanessa froze. "Excuse me?" "The big projection screens you have set up for the laser show," Sterling demanded, pointing to the massive white canvases suspended above the stage. "Turn on the broadcast. I want to see what is happening at Lincoln Center." "Arthur, we cannot do that," Vanessa hissed, lowering her voice. "This is the Obsidian Gala. We cannot broadcast a competitor's event." "I am the lead investor in Obsidian," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low register. "And I am bored. Vanessa, either you turn on the broadcast, or I walk out that door right now and take my checkbook with me." Vanessa looked around. Her husband, Brad, was watching her with wide, panicked eyes. The other guests were already growing restless, sensing the shift in power. She had no choice. "Fine," she snapped at a technician standing nearby. "Switch the feed, just for a minute. Let them see the empty stage so we can get back to business." The technician typed a command. The massive screens above the diamond display flickered to life. The high-definition image of the Lincoln Center stage beamed into the ballroom, looming over the guests like a judgment. At the Lincoln Center, I was standing in the wings. The air smelled of dust and old wood. The darkness was absolute, save for the blue running lights on the floor. 30 seconds. Shirley, the stage manager whispered into his headset. He looked at me and gave a thumbs up. I could hear the audience out there. It was a different kind of sound than the chatter at Vanessa's party. It was a heavy, reverent silence. 3,000 people were holding their breath. "He is ready," I whispered. I looked behind me. Julian was sitting at the Steinway. He looked up at me. He did not look like the broken man in the wheelchair. He looked like a titan who had just woken up from a long sleep. He nodded. Back at the Pierre, the ballroom had gone silent. 500 people were staring up at the screens. "See?" Vanessa said loudly, trying to regain control. "It is just a piano. No one is there. I told you. Arthur, I know Julian's former manager. I know the industry. He would never do something like this without a press tour. He is probably in a Swiss clinic somewhere." On the screen, the lights in the Lincoln Center auditorium dimmed completely. A single stark spotlight snapped on, hitting the center of the stage. It hit the piano. A gasp went through the crowd at Vanessa's gala, even through the video feed. The energy was electric. Then, a voice boomed over the speakers. It was not Julian. It was the master of ceremonies, his voice trembling with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice echoed through the Pierre ballroom, drowning out Vanessa's protests. "Tonight, we witness a miracle. We were told the music was gone forever. We were told the voice was silenced." Vanessa's face went pale. She took a step back, bumping into a waiter. "But tonight," the MC continued, "we welcome back the soul of American rock and blues." A figure walked out of the shadows on the screen. He moved slowly, using a cane, but his head was high. He walked into the spotlight and placed a hand on the piano. The camera zoomed in. "That is him." "Mr. Sterling whispered. "My God, that is Julian Thorne." "Impossible," Vanessa breathed. "It is a hologram. It has to be." The MC's voice rose to a crescendo. "And to introduce him, please welcome the woman who walked into the darkness and brought him back to the light, the recipient of tonight's Dedication to Healing Award." I stepped forward from the wings. The floorboards vibrated beneath my heels. I walked into the blinding white light. "Ms. Shirley Pennington." The camera focused on my face. I looked straight into the lens. I knew that miles away, in a room full of people who thought they were better than me. My sister-in-law was watching. I did not smile. I just stood there, waiting for the world to catch up. The silence that descended upon Lincoln Center was heavy. A physical weight that pressed against the chest of every person in the auditorium. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster or a divine revelation. I stood in the wings, just out of the blinding wash of the spotlight, watching Julian Thorne settle himself onto the piano bench. He moved with a deliberate slowness, adjusting his cane against the side of the Steinway. To the world, this was theater. To me, it was biomechanics. I watched his posture, checking for the tension in his shoulders we had worked for months to release. He lifted his hands for a heartbeat. They hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. Then, he struck the first chord. It was a D minor seventh. Played with such ferocity that I saw the dust motes dancing in the spotlight shudder. He did not play one of his famous stadium anthems. He did not play the blues riffs that had made him a millionaire in his 20s. He played something we had written together in the small therapy room at Serenade. It was a piece born from the darkness of his accident, a melody that sounded like weeping, slowly transforming into a roar of survival. In the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, the atmosphere had shifted from confusion to a trance-like stupor. I can envision the scene with crystal clarity, pieced together from the frantic texts and videos that flooded the internet later that night. The jazz band at Vanessa's gala had stopped playing. Realizing no one was listening, 500 of the city's most self-absorbed individuals were standing like statues, their necks craned toward the massive projection screens. Mr. Sterling, the billionaire investor Vanessa needed to save her quarter, was holding a flute of champagne that had gone warm in his hand. He was not looking at the diamonds. He was not looking at Vanessa. He was staring at the screen where Julian Thorne was pouring his soul into the ivory keys. "Look at his hands," Sterling whispered, his voice cutting through the hush of the ballroom. "They said he would never move his fingers again. Look at them fly." Vanessa was vibrating with panic. She darted around the circle of VIPs like a frantic bird, trying to break the spell. "It is clearly a recording," she said, her laugh high and desperate. "Arthur, really, look at the resolution. It is deep-fake technology. My team uses it all the time. Julian is probably in a coma in Zurich. Let us go look at the necklace, shall we? The clasp is made of platinum." "Be quiet." "Vanessa," Sterling snapped. Without turning his head, the rebuke was sharp and public. Vanessa recoiled as if she had been slapped. Her husband, Brad, stood beside her, his mouth slightly open, looking from his wife to the screen. He looked terrified. Back at Lincoln Center, Julian was reaching the crescendo of the piece. His voice, which had been silent for 10 years, suddenly tore through the air. It was not the smooth, honeyed voice of his youth. It was rougher, deeper, scarred by the tracheotomy and the years of disuse. It was the voice of a man who had walked through fire. He sang a single verse, a guttural cry of redemption that made the hair on my arms stand up. When he hit the final chord, the resonance hung in the air for a long time. No one clapped. The audience was too stunned to applaud. They were witnessing a resurrection. Julian sat there for a moment, his chest heaving. Then, he reached for the microphone on the stand. His hand shook, but he gripped it firmly. "I thought I was dead," Julian said. His speaking voice was raspy, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system so that it sounded like God whispering in everyone's ear. "For 10 years, I lived in a room that was smaller than a prison cell. I screamed, but no sound came out. I had music in my head, but my hands were dead wood." He looked out into the darkness of the auditorium. "The world wrote me off," he continued, a hard edge entering his tone. "The magazines published obituaries while I was still breathing. The so-called media experts, the publicists, the agents, the people who claimed to know what is best for culture, they all said Julian Thorne was finished. They called me a tragedy. They tried to sell my silence." At the Pierre, Vanessa flinched. It was as if he was speaking directly to her, slicing through the miles of fiber optic cable to dress her down in front of her most important clients. "I was ready to let go," Julian confessed, his voice dropping to a murmur. "I was ready to let the silence win, but then, someone opened the door." The camera pushed in for a tight close-up of his face. His eyes were wet. "She did not care about the Grammys," Julian said. "She did not care about the royalties or the fame. She did not ask for an autograph. She just asked me to tap my finger. One tap, then two." In the ballroom, my mother-in-law, Eleanor, leaned in toward her husband. She adjusted her diamond earrings, looking confused. "He must be talking about a specialist," Eleanor whispered loudly. "Some top neurosurgeon from Switzerland, or perhaps a spiritual guru. You know how these artists are." "Obviously," Brad muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It costs millions to treat a guy like that. It was probably a team of doctors." "She is a teacher," Julian said, answering them from the screen. A woman who wakes up at 5 in the morning to take the train to a building that most of you would drive past without a second glance. A woman who spends her days with the broken, the forgotten, the people you call lost causes. He took a deep breath. He turned his head. He looked toward the wing where I was standing. "My family gave up on me," Julian said. "My managers gave up on me. But this teacher? She sat in the dark with me for 730 days. She taught me how to be human again before she taught me how to be a musician." He stood up. He grabbed his cane, but he did not lean on it. He used it to point. "They told me she was just a therapist, just a worker, but tonight, I am here to tell you that she is the only reason music still exists in my world." "Please," Julian shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Stand up and show some respect for my hero, the finest educator, the most patient soul, and the woman who saved my life, the recipient of the Dedication to Healing Award." The camera panned rapidly, searching the wings. At the Pierre, Vanessa was holding her breath. Her face was gray. "Who is it?" Sterling asked, stepping closer to the screen. "Who is this miracle worker?" Julian smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that transformed his scarred face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he roared, "Ms. Shirley Pennington." The name hit the speakers like a thunderclap. In the ballroom, the champagne glass finally slipped from Arthur Sterling's hand. It shattered on the floor, but the sound was swallowed by the collective gasp of the room. Vanessa stopped breathing. Eleanor clutched her pearls so hard the string snapped, sending white beads scattering across the parquet floor like hail. On the giant screen, the camera found me. I walked out of the shadows. I was not the woman who washed their dishes at Thanksgiving. I was not the woman they made sit at the children's table. I was the woman who had just been crowned by a king. I walked toward the center stage, the blue velvet of my gown catching the light, and as the audience at Lincoln Center erupted into a deafening roar, I looked straight ahead. I was ready. I stepped out from the wings, and the world seemed to dissolve into a haze of blinding white light. For a fleeting second, the old Shirley, the woman who apologized for taking up space on the subway, wanted to retreat. But then I felt the fabric of my gown move against my legs. Under the intense stage lights, the velvet shimmered, revealing its true depth. It was not just dark, it was a vibrant, deep emerald green, the color of the deep ocean where things are buried and preserved. It flowed around me like living water, structured yet soft, transforming my silhouette from the invisible therapist into something statuesque. I walked toward the piano. The silence in the hall was absolute. But it was not empty. It was charged with the held breath of 3,000 people. Julian stood up. He did not lean on his cane. He stood tall, his tuxedo sharp against the black backdrop. As I reached him, he did not offer a handshake. He did not offer a polite nod. Julian Thorne, the man who had not touched another human being without flinching in 10 years, took my hand in both of his. He bowed low, a gesture of profound reverence that sent a shockwave through the auditorium. He pressed his lips to my knuckles. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice audible only to me in the front row. Then, he turned me toward the audience, in the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel. The feed on the massive projection screens was crystal clear. It was broadcast in ultra-high definition, capturing every detail that Vanessa had spent her life trying to curate, but failing to achieve authentically. The camera zoomed in for a tight close-up of my face. I was not wearing heavy makeup, just enough to highlight my eyes, which were burning with a quiet intensity. A digital graphic slid across the bottom of the screen, overlaid in elegant gold text. Shirley Pennington, the healer of legends. The reaction in the ballroom was instantaneous and visceral. Vanessa was standing near the center of the room, holding a glass of vintage Pinot Noir. She was staring up at the screen, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Her brain was trying to reject the visual information it was receiving. That could not be Shirley. That could not be the woman she had ordered to watch her dogs 2 days ago. That woman on the screen looked like royalty. "Oh my God," a woman's voice rang out from a nearby table. "Is that not your sister-in-law, Vanessa?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Vanessa turned to look at the speaker, her hand trembling. The tremor was slight at first, then violent. The expensive crystal stem of the wine glass snapped. Red wine exploded across the front of her pristine white couture gown. It bloomed like a gunshot wound, dark and ragged, soaking into the silk and ruining the garment instantly. The crimson liquid dripped down onto the white marble floor. But Vanessa did not even look down. She could not tear her eyes away from the screen. "It is her," another guest whispered, loud enough to be heard over the hum of the ventilation. "That is the woman Vanessa said worked at a daycare." "Mr." Sterling stepped forward. The boredom was gone from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He looked from the screen, where a rock god was kissing my hand, to Vanessa, who was standing covered in wine and humiliation. "You told me she was a lowly teacher," Sterling said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of his billions. "You told me she taught slow children in a basement. You said she was irrelevant," Vanessa stammered, wiping ineffectively at the stain on her chest, smearing the red wine further. "Arthur, I did not know. She never told me. It is a misunderstanding." "It is not a misunderstanding." Sterling cut her off. He pointed a manicured finger at the screen. "That is Julian Thorne, the man you have been lying about knowing for 5 years. He is treating her like she is the Queen of England. And you treated her like the help." Brad was standing next to his wife, his face the color of ash. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. It was vibrating. Then it rang. Then it vibrated again. The screen lit up with notification after notification. Texts from his college friends. Calls from his business partners. Messages from cousins they had not spoken to in years. "Is that your brother's wife?" "Dude, why did you say she was a loser? She is with Thorne. Are you watching Channel 4? The phone buzzed so hard in his hand it almost fell. Brad looked at me on the screen, then at Vanessa. For the first time in their marriage, the look in his eyes was not adoration, it was fear. He realized that the narrative they had built their social standing on, the idea that they were the successful ones and I was the charity case, had just been obliterated on live television. Back at Lincoln Center, the applause finally died down, replaced by an eager hush. I stepped up to the microphone. The stand was cold under my fingers. I looked out into the darkness. I could not see individual faces past the first few rows, but I could feel them. I took a breath. "Thank you. Julian," I began. My voice was steady. I had spent years speaking softly to calm agitated patients, learning how to pitch my tone to command attention without raising volume. That training served me now. "And thank you to the Academy for this honor." I paused. I knew the camera was tight on my face. I knew exactly who was watching. "When I started my career in music therapy," I said, "I was told by many people that I was wasting my talent. I was told that playing piano for the sick and the broken was not a real career." I let my gaze drift slightly to the left, as if looking directly through the camera lens and into the ballroom at the Pierre. "I was told," I continued, emphasizing every syllable, "that I should find a job that offered more prestige, more money, more visibility. I have been called a lowly teacher by people who measure worth in diamond carats and column inches." At the Pierre, the room went deadly silent. "Mr. Sterling turned his back on Vanessa, folding his arms to listen. "They said I spent my life in a dark basement," I said. "And they were right. I did. But what they do not understand is that the basement is where the foundation is built. It is in the dark, where you find the light that actually matters." I looked over at Julian, who was watching me with tears streaming down his face, unashamed. "They call it lowly," I said, my voice rising with emotion. "But tonight, standing here next to a man who found his voice again. I am proud of that lowliness. If being a lowly teacher means I get to help a human being find their way back to themselves, then I do not want to be anything else. I do not want the gala. I do not want the diamonds. I want the work, because the work is the only thing that is real. I stepped back from the microphone. For a second, there was silence. Then, in the front row, a figure stood up. It was the Vice President of the United States. Beside her, the lead actor of the year's biggest blockbuster stood up, then the entire front row, then the balcony. It was a tidal wave. 3,000 people rose to their feet. The sound was not just applause, it was a roar of approval, a validation that shook the floorboards beneath my feet. I saw famous actresses wiping their eyes. I saw senators nodding in agreement. Back at the Pierre, the screen showed the standing ovation. It showed the most powerful people in the country honoring the lowly teacher. Vanessa stood alone in her circle of space. The guests had instinctively backed away from her, as if her bad judgment was contagious. She was stained, exposed, and utterly defeated. The image on the screen, me, radiant in emerald velvet, surrounded by adoring stars, was a mirror reflecting everything she was not. She had the diamonds, but I had the shine. And everyone in the room knew it. "Mister," Sterling turned to his assistant, "cancel the check," he said loud enough for Vanessa to hear, "and get my car. I'm going to Lincoln Center. I want to meet the real talent of this family." The standing ovation eventually subsided. Settling into a hum of electric anticipation, the master of ceremonies, a veteran broadcaster known for his hard-hitting interviews, stepped closer to us. He did not let the moment cool down. He sensed, as all good journalists do, that there was more blood in the water. He gestured for the stagehands to bring 2 high stools. Julian and I sat down. Center stage, bathed in the unforgiving white light. "Julian," the MC started, holding his microphone with a practiced ease. "This return is nothing short of historic. You have been gone for 10 years. The industry has changed, but speaking of the industry, there has been significant chatter over the last 48 hours regarding your future plans." I saw Julian's jaw tighten. He knew what was coming. We had not scripted this, but he was ready. "There is a persistent rumor," the MC continued, looking directly at the camera, "that you are preparing to sign an exclusive representation deal with the Pennington PR Group, specifically, with Ms. Vanessa Pennington, who happens to be organizing the Obsidian Gala tonight. Is there any truth to the whisper that you will be headlining her future events?" The question hung in the air. At the Lincoln Center, the audience leaned forward, but at the Pierre Hotel, the silence was absolute. Vanessa, who had been frantically trying to dab the red wine from her dress with a linen napkin, froze. She looked up at the screen, her eyes pleading with the electronic image of the man she had never met. She needed him to lie. She needed him to be vague. She needed a miracle. Julian leaned into the microphone. He let a small, confused frown crease his forehead. "Vanessa?" he asked. The name sounded foreign in his mouth. He turned to me, his expression perfectly bewildered. "Shirley, is that the sister-in-law you mentioned? The one who said she was too busy watching her dogs to come to see you receive your award tonight?" The audience at Lincoln Center laughed. It was a low ripple of amusement at the absurdity of it, but on the screen at the Pierre, it was not funny. It was a death sentence. Julian turned back to the MC. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a cold granite hardness. "Let me be very clear," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "I do not know Vanessa Pennington. I have never spoken to her. My management team has a strict policy regarding her agency." He paused for effect. "They are on the blacklist." The word blacklist echoed through the speakers of the Pierre Ballroom like a gunshot. "I do not do business with liars," Julian continued, his voice ringing with authority. "And I certainly do not do business with people who treat their family like garbage. If she cannot respect a woman as incredible as Shirley Pennington, She does not deserve to be in the same room as my music. So, no, there is no collaboration. There never was, and there never will be. The feed cut to a wide shot of the audience cheering. But in the ballroom, the reaction was catastrophic. Arthur Sterling, who had been hovering near the table, slammed his hand down on the white tablecloth. The silverware rattled. "You lied to me," Sterling roared. He did not care who was watching. He did not care about decorum. "You looked me in the eye and told me you had him. You leveraged his name to get my $5 million sponsorship." "Arthur, please," Vanessa begged, grabbing his sleeve. Her hands were stained red from the wine, making her look like she had committed a murder. "It is a misunderstanding. He is confused. He has brain damage. Remember? I can fix this. I can call his people." "Do not touch me," Sterling snarled, shaking her off. "Consider the contract void. My lawyers will be in touch in the morning for breach of trust. And I am taking the Obsidian account with me. You are finished in this town. Vanessa." He turned and marched toward the exit. That was the signal. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The guests at the luxury gala, the people Vanessa had spent her entire career trying to impress, began to leave. They did not say goodbye. They simply turned their backs. They checked their phones, whispering to each other, showing the live stream where Julian was now playing a soft melody while I smiled at the crowd. The live stream chat on the giant screens, which Vanessa had forgotten to turn off, was scrolling so fast it was a blur, but the comments were readable enough. "The sister-in-law is the villain of the year. Did she really call Shirley a lowly teacher? Look at her now. Vanessa Pennington is cancelled. RIP. Imagine choosing a dog over Julian Thorne. LOL. Brad stood amidst the exodus, looking like a man whose house had just collapsed while he was standing in the living room. His friends, investment bankers, hedge fund managers, walked past him without making eye contact. He reached out to grab the arm of his best friend from college. "Mike, wait," Brad said. "We can still go to the after party." Mike pulled his arm away. "Dude," he said, shaking his head, "your wife just got roasted by a national treasure, and you let her treat your brother's wife like that? Lose my number." My parents-in-law, Eleanor and Richard, had collapsed onto their chairs. They were no longer the regal matriarch and patriarch of the Pennington dynasty. They were two old people shrinking under the weight of public shame. Eleanor held a napkin to her face, hiding from the glares of the few remaining guests. "How could she?" Eleanor sobbed into the linen. "How could Shirley do this to us?" "She did not do anything," Richard snapped, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and realization. "We did this. We bet on the wrong horse, Eleanor, and now the whole world knows it." Vanessa was standing alone in the center of the dance floor. The room was emptying rapidly. The waiters were already starting to clear the untouched food. She looked around, her eyes wild, looking for someone, anyone, to validate her. Then, her phone rang. It was not a text. It was a call. The screen displayed a single name, the chairman. It was the head of the global conglomerate that owned her PR firm. He never called. He only emailed. Vanessa picked up the phone with shaking fingers. "Sir?" she whispered. The voice on the other end was loud enough that even Brad, standing 3 feet away, could hear it. "Turn on the TV. Vanessa," the chairman barked. "Actually, do not bother. You have single-handedly destroyed the credibility of this agency in 10 minutes. We represent integrity. You have just been exposed as a fraud on national television." "I can explain," Vanessa cried, tears finally spilling over, mixing with the mascara running down her cheeks. "It was a strategy. It was high risk, high reward." "You are fired," the voice said. Cold, final. "Effective immediately. Security will meet you at the office tomorrow to supervise the packing of your personal effects. Do not talk to the press. Do not use our name. You are done." The line went dead. The contrast between the two worlds was now complete. On the giant screens that still loomed over the empty ballroom, I was standing in a shower of rose petals. Julian was hugging me. The vice president was shaking my hand. I looked radiant, powerful, and surrounded by love. In the ballroom, Vanessa stood in a puddle of red wine and shattered glass. The room was silent except for the clinking of dishes being cleared by the staff, who were trying not to look at her. She was holding a dead phone. Her husband was looking at the floor. Her investors were gone. Her career was ash. She looked up at my face on the screen, huge and triumphant. For the first time in her life, she was exactly what she had accused me of being. She was irrelevant. I did not know any of this was happening at that exact moment. I only knew that Julian was squeezing my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was taking up too much space. I felt like I had finally arrived. The after-party was held in a private penthouse overlooking Central Park, a world away from the chaotic energy of the auditorium. Here, the air was cool and smelled of jasmine and expensive scotch. There were no flashing cameras, no screaming fans, and no desperate social climbers. The room was populated by the true heavyweights of the industry, people who did not need to raise their voices to be heard. I stood on the balcony, clutching a glass of sparkling water. My hands were finally steady. Inside, Julian was sitting on a velvet sofa, laughing with a famous cellist and the vice president. He looked younger than he had in years. The weight of his silence was gone, replaced by the buoyancy of a man who had reclaimed his soul. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I had turned it off right before I stepped onto the stage. When I powered it back on, the device nearly vibrated out of my hand. It buzzed continuously for a solid minute, a frantic, mechanical seizure of notifications. I looked at the screen. 50 missed calls. There were 20 missed calls from my husband's brother, Brad. There were 15 from my mother-in-law, Eleanor, and there were 10 from Vanessa. The remaining 5 were from numbers I did not recognize, likely journalists who had managed to bribe someone for my private line. I stared at the list. For years, I had checked my phone hoping for a text from them. I used to wait for an invitation to brunch, a thank you for a gift, a simple acknowledgement of my existence. Now, I had their undivided attention. I saw a voicemail notification from Eleanor. It had been left 10 minutes ago, against my better judgment. I lifted the phone to my ear and pressed play. "Shirley, darling," Eleanor's voice chirped through the speaker. It was a tone I recognized. It was the voice she used when she was trying to return a dress she had already worn. It was fake, saccharine, and laced with panic. "I had no idea. Why did you not tell us you were so close with Julian Thorne? You know your father and I have always loved his music. We are family. After all, families have secrets. But this is a big one. Anyway, call me back immediately. We were thinking, perhaps you could bring Julian to the Christmas dinner this year. I will order the prime rib he likes. Love you." I lowered the phone. The audacity was so pure it was almost impressive. She had forgotten the dinner 2 days ago. She had forgotten watching her daughter-in-law humiliate me. She had erased the last 7 years of neglect because suddenly, I held the keys to the kingdom she wanted to enter. She did not want me at Christmas. She wanted the anecdote. She wanted to tell her country club friends that she had Julian Thorne eating her prime rib. Then, I opened the text thread with Vanessa. It was a study in the 5 stages of grief, played out in blue bubbles. The first message, sent while I was still on stage. "What the hell are you doing? You are ruining everything." The second message, sent 5 minutes later. "Arthur Sterling just walked out. He canceled the contract. You need to stop this right now." The third message, sent 20 minutes later. "Shirley, please, my boss is on the line. He is talking about firing me. You have to fix this." The final message, sent just moments ago. "I lost my job. They fired me. Shirley, please, I am begging you, go on Twitter. Tell them it was a joke. Tell them we are close. Tell them Julian was just being dramatic. I will do anything. I will pay you. Just save me." I looked at the words. "I will pay you." Even now, stripped of her title and her dignity, she thought my silence could be bought. She thought I was still the woman who needed her money. A final message popped up from a number I had not saved, but I recognized the profile picture. It was Sarah, a therapist at the Serenade Institute, who had often made snide comments about my quiet demeanor and my boring methods. "Hey Shirley, I just saw you on TV. OMG, I always knew you were special. Sorry I did not sit with you at lunch last week. I was so busy. We should grab coffee tomorrow? My treat." I looked at the notifications stacking up like bricks in a wall I no longer needed to climb. For a decade, I had let these people define my worth. I had let Vanessa's sneers make me feel small. I had let Brad's indifference make me feel invisible. I had let Eleanor's condescension make me feel unworthy. I had internalized their lowly label until it was tattooed on my psyche. But as I stood there, looking at the city lights of Manhattan, I realized something profound. Their approval did not matter. Their apologies did not matter. And their suffering did not matter. They were not villains I needed to defeat anymore. They were just strangers. I did not type a reply. I did not draft a witty comeback to Vanessa or a polite refusal to Eleanor. I swiped left. Delete thread. I swiped left again. Delete thread. I walked back inside the penthouse. Julian looked up and smiled. He beckoned me over. His assistant, a sharp young man named Marcus, was standing nearby with a clipboard. "Marcus," I said, holding out my phone. "Yes, Ms. Pennington?" "Take this," I said, placing the device in his hand. "The number has been compromised. I need a new one by tomorrow morning. And please set the privacy settings to maximum. Only people on the approved list can get through." "Of course," Marcus said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "And the messages on this one?" "Delete them," I said. "All of them. I do not need to read yesterday's news." I sat down next to Julian. He poured me a glass of water. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Perfect," I said, and I meant it, miles away. I knew exactly what was happening. I did not need a camera to see it. I knew the Penningtons well enough to script their ride home. They would be in the back of their hired Lincoln town car, creeping through the traffic on the bridge back to Connecticut. The interior would be dark. Richard would be staring out the window, calculating how much stock value he might lose if the association with Vanessa's toxic brand tainted his own reputation. Eleanor would be weeping silently, dabbing her eyes, mourning the loss of her social standing, terrified that the country club ladies were already gossiping about her. And Brad, my husband's brother, the man who had told me to know my place, he would be sitting between them, staring at his knees. The silence in the car would be deafening. He would be replaying the moment his best friend walked away from him. He would be thinking about the mortgage on the house he and Vanessa could no longer afford. He would be glancing at Vanessa, who would be slumped against the door, her white dress stained with wine, her makeup ruined, her phone dark in her lap. They would not be speaking to each other. There would be no screaming, no fighting, just the heavy, suffocating weight of the truth sitting on their chests. They were alone. They had stripped me of my dignity for years, and in doing so, they had stripped themselves of the only person who would have actually helped them when the world turned its back. I took a sip of water. The jazz pianist in the corner began to play a soft, lullaby version of one of Julian's old hits. I closed my eyes. The silence in my head was beautiful. It was the sound of freedom. The sun rose over New York City at 6:30 in the morning, casting a cold, impartial light on the wreckage of the previous night. I was awake to see it, watching the sunrise from the floor-to-ceiling windows of a temporary suite at the Plaza Hotel that the network had arranged for me. I drank my coffee black and unfolded the newspapers that had been delivered to the door. The headlines were not kind to the Pennington family. The New York Post, always eager for blood, ran a full front-page spread. On the left was a photo of me, radiant in emerald velvet, holding Julian's hand. On the right was a grainy, zoomed-in shot of Vanessa, her dress stained with red wine, her face twisted in a rictus of panic. The headline screamed in bold block letters, "The Quiet Teacher and the Loud Fraud." But the print media was slow compared to the internet. While I had slept, the digital world had been conducting a forensic investigation into my life and Vanessa's. The story of the lowly teacher had struck a nerve with millions of people who felt undervalued in their own lives. They wanted justice, and they found it. Former acquaintances began to come out of the woodwork. A woman who had been a bridesmaid at Brad and Vanessa's wedding 5 years ago posted a thread on Twitter. She detailed how Vanessa had forced me to sit at the table with the catering staff because she claimed my department store dress would ruin the aesthetic of her photos. Another old college roommate of Vanessa's shared screenshots of emails where Vanessa bragged about manipulating her family into paying for her startup. The hashtag #LowlyTeacher became the #1 trending topic in the United States, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been looked down upon. By noon, the professional consequences for Vanessa began to materialize with the speed of a guillotine. The breach of contract lawsuit from Arthur Sterling was filed at 9 o'clock sharp. He was not just suing for the return of his sponsorship money. He was suing for damages to his reputation and fraud. The sum was staggering. My lawyer, provided by the Institute, told me the figure was over $3 million. Vanessa did not have $3 million. She had a leased lifestyle and a mountain of credit card debt masked as wealth. By 2 in the afternoon, the real estate listings showed a new urgent addition. The penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, the one Vanessa and Brad had leveraged to the hilt to afford, was listed for an immediate fire sale. They needed cash to pay the settlement to keep Vanessa out of court and potentially out of jail for fraud. The empire of smoke and mirrors she had built for a decade had evaporated in less than 12 hours. I learned later that my parents-in-law, Eleanor and Richard, had tried to find me that morning. They did not call. They knew I was not answering. Instead, they drove their sedan to my old apartment building in Queens. The walk-up with the broken buzzer they had refused to visit for 7 years because the neighborhood was too ethnic. They stood on the sidewalk, ringing the bell for apartment 3B repeatedly. Eventually, my old landlord, Mr. Henderson, came out to sweep the stoop. "She is gone, Mr. Henderson told them, leaning on his broom. "What do you mean, gone?" Eleanor demanded, clutching her handbag. "She lives here. We are her family. She moved out a week ago." "Mr. Henderson said, likely enjoying the look of confusion on their faces. "A moving truck came. Nice one. Took everything. She paid the lease break fee in cash. Said she was moving to a place where the heating actually works, if you are her family. Surely you know her new address." They did not. They realized then that I had been planning my exit long before the gala, desperate. They drove to the Serenade Rehabilitation Institute. They expected to find the depressing basement Vanessa had mocked. Instead, they found a facility under siege by news vans. The Institute had become ground zero for the story of the year. They tried to push past the reception desk, using the Pennington name like a club. "We need to see Shirley Pennington," Richard demanded of the security guard. "We are her in-laws. It is a family emergency." The guard, a burly man who had seen me work with patients for years and had always treated me with more respect than my own family, did not budge. "Ms. Pennington is currently in a board meeting," the guard said. "She has been appointed as a senior partner this morning, and per her instructions, she is not to be disturbed by unsolicited visitors. Do you have an appointment?" "We are her parents," Eleanor shrieked, her composure cracking. "You are not on the list," the guard said, crossing his arms. "Please leave the premises, or I will have to call the police." They left. They were not used to doors being closed in their faces. They were learning, painfully, that their name was no longer a key that opened every lock. At 4 o'clock. My phone buzzed with a message from a new number. I had changed my primary number as planned, but I had kept the old SIM card active in a burner phone for one specific reason. I knew Brad would try one last time. The message was long. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. "Shirley, this has gone too far. Mom is having heart palpitations. Vanessa is suicidal. We are losing the apartment. I know you are angry, and maybe we were a little harsh, but you are destroying your family. You made your point. Please, call Sterling and tell him to drop the lawsuit. Julian will listen to you. We can work this out. I can be the mediator. Let us just sit down and talk. I read it twice. Maybe we were a little harsh, even now. Amidst the rubble of his life, he could not admit the cruelty. He wanted to be the mediator. He wanted to play the neutral party, as if he had not sat there eating his steak while his wife called me a peasant. I typed my response slowly. I wanted every word to be granite. You want to be a mediator. Brad, a mediator is someone who steps in when the conflict starts. You did not step in. You sat there. You laughed when she mocked my students. You nodded when she called me a waste of space. You were there when she called me a lowly teacher, and you said nothing. Your silence was not neutrality. Your silence was complicity. Do not contact me again. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I took the SIM card out of the phone and snapped it in half. I sat back in the chair. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was clean. The narrative that the media was spinning was that I had orchestrated a master plan of revenge. They called me a mastermind, but the truth was far simpler and far colder. I had not pushed Vanessa off a cliff. I had not told Sterling to pull his funding. I had not told the internet to dig up her past. All I had done was stand in the light. Their downfall was not caused by my actions. It was caused by their own hollow structures collapsing under the weight of the truth. Vanessa's career died because it was built on lies. The family's reputation died because it was built on arrogance. They had spent years handing me the ammunition. I simply finally pulled the trigger. I picked up the check that sat on the desk. It was the prize money from the Dedication to Healing Award. Along with a matching personal donation from Julian Thorne, it was a check for $500,000. I picked up my pen. I was not going to buy a diamond necklace. I was not going to buy a penthouse. I filled out the deposit slip for a new account I had opened that morning. The account was titled, The Pennington Foundation for Underprivileged Young Musicians. I would use the money to buy violins for kids in the Bronx. I would pay for piano lessons for children who lived in basements like the one I worked in. I would use the name they thought was shameful to build something beautiful. I signed my name at the bottom. The ink was black and permanent. The revenge was complete. Not because they were suffering, but because I was free. 6 months is a long time in a city like New York. In 6 months, skyscrapers can top out, fortunes can be made, and names that were once plastered on every billboard can be scrubbed away by the relentless rain. The scandal that had consumed the Pennington family had burned hot and fast, like a flare, and then it had faded into the background noise of the metropolis. The internet moved on to the next villain, the next hero, and the next viral moment. But my world did not fade. It expanded. I stood in the center of the atrium of the Pennington Music Therapy Center. It was not a basement. It was a converted loft in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows that let the sunlight pour in like melted butter. We had opened our doors 3 weeks ago. The paint still smelled fresh. The sound of a cello drifted down from the second floor, where a group of teenagers from the foster system were having their first lesson. It was a messy, chaotic, beautiful sound. I was no longer just Shirley the therapist. I was Shirley the director. But titles had never mattered to me. And they still did not. I still spent 6 hours a day in the sessions, doing the work. That afternoon, I had a rare gap in my schedule. I decided to run an errand that felt deliciously mundane after the whirlwind of lawyers and contractors I had dealt with for months. I needed to buy a birthday gift for my assistant. I took a cab to the large shopping mall in downtown Brooklyn. The mall was crowded, a river of people moving between stores. I walked into a large department store, aiming for the cosmetics section. The air was thick with the scent of a dozen conflicting perfumes. I was looking at a display of lipsticks when a voice stopped me. "Can I help you find a shade, ma'am?" The voice was familiar. It was a voice I had heard scream at me over dinner tables. It was a voice I had heard mock me on phone calls. But now, it was stripped of its sharp edges. It was flat, mechanical, and tired. I looked up. Standing behind the glass counter, wearing a black uniform that was slightly too large for her, was Vanessa. She looked different. The sleek, predatory bob cut was gone. grown out into a messy shoulder-length style that had not seen a stylist in months. Her face, usually contoured to perfection, was bare except for the required store makeup, but it was her eyes that held the biggest change. The fire was gone. There was only a dull resentment smoldering in the ash. She froze when she saw me. Her hand, holding a tester tube of lipstick, hovered in the air. "Shirley," she breathed. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. My pulse did not race. My hands did not sweat. I felt a strange sense of calm. She looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was filming, but no one was looking at us. We were just two women at a makeup counter. "You are shopping here?" she asked, her voice laced with a bitter disbelief. "I thought you would be on Fifth Avenue, with your new money, with your celebrity friends." "I shop where I have always shopped," I said simply. "I am looking for a gift." Vanessa let out a short, harsh laugh. She began to wipe the counter with a rag, her movements jerky and angry. "Must be nice, to be the saint, to be the victim that everyone loves. How are things, Vanessa?" I asked. It was not a taunt. I genuinely wanted to know. "How are things?" she repeated, her voice rising slightly. She leaned over the counter, her eyes narrowing. "I am selling mascara for $15 an hour. Shirley, that is how things are. Brad is driving for a rideshare app. We live in a studio apartment in Jersey City that smells like damp carpet. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted?" She stopped wiping the counter and gripped the edge of the glass. "You ruined my life. You know that, right? You took everything from me. My career, my home, my reputation. You burned it all down because you could not handle a little criticism." I looked at her. Even now, after losing everything, she could not see the truth. She still believed she was the protagonist of a tragedy, struck down by a villainous sister-in-law. She could not comprehend that she was the architect of her own collapse. "I did not ruin your life, Vanessa," I said. My voice was soft, but it cut through the noise of the department store. "You did," she hissed. "You turned everyone against me." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "I just turned on the lights." She blinked, confused. "You built a life in the dark," I continued. "You built a castle out of lies and pretension. You thrived because no one could see who you really were. All I did was flip the switch. I stood in the light, and the light touched you, too. What happened after that? The way people looked at you, the way you fell, that was not my doing. That was just people finally seeing you clearly. You are not afraid of me, Vanessa. You are afraid of the light." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, to scream, to throw one last insult, but the words died in her throat. She looked at me, standing there in my simple coat, comfortable in my own skin, and she realized that nothing she said could hurt me anymore. I was immune to her poison because I no longer drank from her cup. "Excuse me," a customer said, walking up to the counter next to me. "I need help with a foundation match." Vanessa looked at the customer, then back at me. Ideally, she wanted to storm off. She wanted to make a scene, but she needed this job. She needed the $15 an hour. She swallowed her pride. It was a bitter pill. I could see it going down. "I will be right with you," Vanessa muttered to the customer. I turned to leave. I did not say goodbye. There was no need. I walked out of the department store and back into the bustling street. The air tasted cold and clean. I felt lighter, as if the last tether to my past had finally snapped. I took the subway back to the center. I walked past the reception desk, waving to the new receptionist, and headed straight for the back room. Room 3 was quiet. The walls were soundproofed, creating a sanctuary of silence in the middle of the city. Sitting in the armchair by the window was Mr. Kowalski. Mr. Kowalski was 78 years old. He was a Vietnam veteran who had suffered a stroke 6 months ago. The stroke had stolen the use of his right side and his ability to speak clearly. He had been a pianist before the war. Now, his right hand sat curled in his lap. Useless. I sat down at the piano bench next to him. I did not open a workbook. I did not ask him to perform. "Hello," "Arthur," I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes frustrated and wet. He hated being like this. He hated the weakness. "Let us try the left hand today," I said. "Just the melody. You remember it." I placed my hand on the lower keys to provide the bass line. I nodded to him. He lifted his trembling left hand. He hesitated. He looked at the keys as if they were enemies. "It is okay," I whispered. "Find the home note." His finger hovered, then pressed down on middle C. The note rang out. Clear, true. He pressed the next one, an E, then a G. Slowly, shakily, the melody of Shenandoah began to fill the room. It was not perfect. The rhythm was uneven, but it was music. It was a man speaking without words. I played the accompaniment, weaving my notes around him, supporting him, holding him up. I watched his face. The frustration began to melt away. The lines of pain around his eyes smoothed out. For the first time in the 3 weeks I had been treating him, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. He was smiling. It was a small smile, crooked and weak. But to me, it was brighter than the spotlight at Lincoln Center. It was louder than the applause of 3,000 people. It was more valuable than the $500,000 check in the bank. This was the work. This was the glory. Not the cameras, not the dresses, not the revenge. It was this moment of connection, this tiny victory against the silence. I kept playing, tears pricking my own eyes. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. They called me a lowly teacher. They meant it as an insult. They thought lowly meant beneath them. But they were wrong. To be lowly is to be close to the ground. It is to be close to the roots. Where the growth happens, it is to be close to the foundation that holds everything else up. I thank them for the name, because it was there, in the lowly places, in the basements and the quiet rooms, that I found the things that actually matter. I found the music, I found the healing, and I found a strength that they will never touch, because they are too busy looking down to see the stars rising from the earth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Shirley's journey brought you some satisfaction and inspiration today. Please let me know in the comments section below where you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel Sweet Rose Drama, giving this video a like, and smashing that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. See you in the next story.